Welcome, folks, to our podcast, Therapy on a Tangent. I'm Natalie, and this is my co-host.
Hi, folks. I'm Zori.
And this is where we talk about our geeky passions and mental health. So, Zori, what have you been geeking out on recently?
So I have the honor of having a lot of really good friends and a lot of colleagues and people in the field who are coming out with books. And one of the books is The Pattern That Remains by Dr. Stacey Lightham. It's Patterns That Remain, A Guide to Healing for Asian Children of Immigrants. And it basically talks a lot about Asian American history, Asian American mental health and therapeutic modalities. And she blends a lot of history with storytelling and then also her own experience as a Filipina and Chinese immigrant. So it's really cool. And yeah, I'm just really amazed by just all the really talented people in my life who are coming out with books and books that are really helpful in terms of mental health or just overall joy, because I have other friends who are just, storytellers. So yeah, that's what I'm into. It's currently out. If you want to check it out, highly recommend. What about you, Natalie?
So, on a less serious note, the video game that I play the most right now is Destiny 2. And the new season just dropped. So right now I'm playing the new season, and with the people that I play with, we kind of have this ongoing joke, but not really a joke, that they like to hear the story through the lens of Natalie. Because at some point, I follow the story along until I stop. And then I'm just confused all the time. So they like to ask me, so what's going on in the story, Natalie? So that I could give them my iteration of what I think is happening. And about half the time, it's probably wrong. Just because it's either I stop paying attention to the story or I haven't caught up with what's happening. So it's just there are holes in what's happening in my head. So this time, I'm trying to pay attention to the story.
That seems very on point for you.
I mean, I think that's part of life. When we don't have enough information, we just kind of fill in the gaps with our own story. So yeah, people enjoy hearing about what I think is happening in this game. And a lot of times, 50% of the time, I'm absolutely wrong. Or I'm just making stuff up.
Maybe we should do that one day. Have an episode where I make you watch something or explain something. Either something that you watch or maybe something you don't even know about, you just heard about, and have you explain what you think it's about. I think that would be funny.
Oh my gosh. I think that's gonna be too exposing though. They're gonna find out what's going on in my brain when I have to fill in the gaps for things.
Oh my gosh.
But anyway, so today we're going to be talking about junk food entertainment. And this is kind of a concept that kind of came about when I was talking to one of my clients about what they do just to take care of themselves, self-care. How do they entertain themselves? How do they feel rested and refreshed and stuff like that? And this idea came out of there's some entertainment out there that we could call junk food because it's not intellectually stimulating. It's not engaging in ways that is more active. So it's a lot of passive things or things that don't require a whole lot of thought. So that could be scrolling on social media, just going through short form content on different media platforms. It could be reality TV, things like that. And so we talked a little bit about, are those things helpful in terms of rest, or are they unhelpful? Circumstances that we might look to junk food entertainment opposed to actually something more stimulating for rest. So that's just kind of what we're talking about today. Zori, what do you think about junk food entertainment?
Ooh, well, also, this was the first time I ever heard of it or heard of something as called junk food entertainment. But I think it kind of makes sense. When you first brought this up, I was thinking ooh, what's my junk food entertainment? And I guess maybe it has some relationship maybe to guilty pleasures, because that's what I thought about. So for me, a lot of it is reality TV shows. As a counselor educator and professors. Sometimes I'm so busy with like grading or answering emails and stuff like that where I want to have something in the background, but also like I don't want to necessarily have to pay attention to all of it. And I found with reality TV shows, or at least the ones that I watch, I can like zone out while I'm doing something and then zone back in and still have the like idea of what's going on in the show or episode, compared to something else, which is like, actual scripted television. I mean, reality TV is scripted, but you know what I mean. Something with an actual storyline where there's a lot of nuances and how characters say things, or sometimes how the camera pans onto certain things that if you're not fully paying attention to, you're going to miss. And kind of like you were saying, Natalie, how sometimes you be watching something or be part of something and then you forget, or you start making up your own thing. I don't like doing that with shows. I like to know exactly what's happening. I like to be aware of exactly how things connect. And so oftentimes I wind up not watching things, even things I really want to watch, because I don't have the time to like give it my full attention. So yeah, when I think of junk, I think of reality TV shows. I think of I like to watch Let's Plays on YouTube and Twitch, and especially like horror video games. So like that's another thing where like sometimes I just put that on in the background when I'm either doing work or sometimes when I'm cooking. And yeah, I'm kind of aware of what's going on, but I don't really focus too much on everything.
And I think this also kind of, brings about a different term that people have used that I think describes kind of the same thing. It's like the brain rot kind of content, where there isn't anything that's too substantive, but it's also just like rotting your brain because it's not intellectually stimulating, but then like certain things get stuck in your brain and it's just kind of like turning to mush. And I think that's kind of perhaps along the same lines of like junk food entertainment. It's kind of like that brain rot content where, your brain is just like consuming things, but not actually doing anything substantive with it. But then you get like things that stick in your head that's just like memes or something like that.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is your current or go-to junk food entertainment right now, Natalie?
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think, because I'm sure I'm guilty of lots of this. I think like the short form content gets to me a lot of times because it's so easy to just scroll. And I like being
like TikTok?
Well, yeah, TikTok, but actually like I don't like being on TikTok. I'm more of an Instagram person. So I'm on Instagram a lot, just scrolling through the reels. And a lot of times it's it's like the things that I get stuck on are like cat videos or like food videos and things like that. So that's kind of like my junk food entertainment. But I do get bored of it rather quickly, so I think perhaps that's a good thing. I can't like just scroll for hours, but I know there's some people who can just scroll for hours.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I guess like the thought that comes up is like when we're trying to rest and we're trying to like recharge for ourselves, do you think it's helpful to just be doing like scrolling or like watching reality TV shows?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we always say, everything in moderation. But I do think they play their role in terms of for some people, how they relax. So right now, the two reality TV shows that I've been watching pretty frequently is the new season of RuPaul's Drag Race, and then season 17, and then I believe it's season 3 of Traitors. And those are both shows that I do like enjoy watching, but not often, though there are some moments in Drag Race where I'm just like, oh, that was really impactful. But for the most part, it's like something that I like to play to not really think about either work or, sometimes other things that are going on in life. And it's something, again, that's like kind of very low energy because, like I said before, sometimes there's other shows where I really want to watch it, but I know that how my brain works, where I want to make sure I'm following the story, it's going to take up a lot more energy. So sometimes I wind up not doing it and wind up watching like the reality TV shows that provide a little less effort. Also, like another reality TV show that I like to watch is like Love is Blind. And I think that, again, their new season, I think season 8 is coming out soon. Apparently, there's already drama before the season has already come out. But um, that's like another thing. And sometimes I like to watch Love is Blind as like a transition junk food entertainment. So I don't know if you have these where it's like, I'm not necessarily, for whatever reason, ready to turn my brain off just yet. But I also don't want something, again, like I said, like the more scripted shows where you need to pay attention to like every little thing. So sometimes like Love is Blind is like a nice little transition show, because sometimes I still have my therapist brain on in terms of like couples counseling and relationship stuff that's going on, where I'm like, oh, that's a good example of like triangulation, or that's a good example of a toxic relationship. And, maybe I can show that to my students in class for, whatever. But also, again, it's still like very low risk for me. Like I could still technically like zone out and still, for the most part, understand like what happened. So yeah, I think for me, and I don't know if this is true for everyone or if this is just how I'm thinking about junk food entertainment. I think of like those transition ones, and then those like complete I can zone out type ones.
Mm-hmm. And actually, you bring up a really good thought about this, because I do think that perhaps like the idea of junk food entertainment maybe does vary from person to person. Because when I think about like the kind of things that the entertainment that we indulge in, is it stimulating to our brains or is it not stimulating to our brains? And when I say that, I mean, like, does it cause us to think and engage with the content? Mm-hmm. And I think that actually is different for a lot of people, right? Because as therapists, I think when you watch a reality show like Love is Blind, like you do start getting stimulated and you try to engage with that content. You're thinking about it a little bit in a more like academic way. Whereas like somebody who might not be a therapist, that's just in it for the drama, might not think about mm-hmm. it that way. So then that becomes more like junk food entertainment for them, because they're not actively engaging with it. And I think that's the same with like other forms of entertainment too. Like some people are totally not entertained by like let's plays, or they're not thinking about mm-hmm. that. Because actually when you were talking about how like let's plays one of your junk food entertainment, I was like, oh, interesting. I don't necessarily consider that as junk food entertainment for me, because the let's plays help me actually work through a game that I'm actually playing, and that's why I watch the let's plays. So I think that's just an interesting thing about it. One person's junk food entertainment might not be the same as somebody else's junk food entertainment.
Yeah, because usually if I'm watching let's plays, I mean, as I've said before, my main platform is Switch. Though I would love to have a PS5. And I was telling Natalie, there's one game that I just want an Xbox for. It's the only game. It's like South of Midnight. But anyway, I don't watch Let's Plays because I don't have the money to play the games. I don't have the platforms to play the game. So I'm not going to like, oh, let me learn how to do it so I can do it myself. I'm going to like, I don't have access to the system, so I'm going to watch someone else play these systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's also a time and place, I think, for the junk food entertainment. Because I think you're talking about those situations where, like, you're coming home from, like, a long day of work and you've just been, like, probably engaging with students all day, and then you just want to turn your brain off for a moment. And I think that's probably when, like, it's restful to just not have to think about something and you can kind of zone out. But then I'm also mm-hmm. thinking about some people who don't necessarily need that, right? Maybe they need something that feels more active for their brain to mm-hmm. recharge and things like that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts around that. Just like what do you think is helpful for people when they think about using entertainment as rest?
Yeah, I mean, again, everything in moderation. I do think there are some times where I'm just like, okay, I don't want to just watch, reality TV, or I don't just want to watch Let's Play. I want to watch something that I can like learn from. And again, that could be a variety of different things. That could be like podcasts, that could be documentaries, that could be maybe even not something that I'm learning from, but something that again stimulates my mind. And I think that stimulation piece is like really important, like on a developmental level, where either ideally want to feel stimulated emotionally or stimulated like in terms of learning something. And I do think that is important in regards to like diversifying the media that we take in, because again, you don't want to just always have your brain off. And I think also like just again developmentally and then like thinking about it in terms of the lifespan, when you allow your brain to be stimulated in healthy ways, that has like better all lasting effects in terms of like aging, mental wellness, cognitive wellness, and stuff like that. Obviously, it's not just like media that you need to play. So like, there's some times where I'm just like, okay, I don't want to watch anything on TV. I just want to read a book. And actually, that's something that I've been trying to do a lot more in the year of 2025. Again, we're not about New Year's resolutions because those usually never stick, but like just something in general that I just really wanted to get more into is like reading more books, and not having that visual stimulation. Even if I'm listening to like an audiobook, like still having that, not having that visual stimulation, I think has still impacted my brain or stimulated my brain in other ways that I haven't had the chance to do because I've been so busy with other things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do need to be aware of that. And I think, when we're just taking in what we consider junk food, or I think also when I think of like junk food or or brain rot, as you said, I'm thinking about things that like don't nourish me, not only intellectually, but like also like in terms of my soul as well. There's a lot of things that again aren't necessarily intellectually stimulating, but they are like, they just feel good for my soul. So again, we're recording this in February. I don't know when this is going to come out, but like one thing that has been popping up a lot on my Instagram page is the Black National Anthem. And like I've been listening to like different versions of that by different Black people on repeat, and I'm just like, yes, this is like, oh, thank you for feeding me, type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I wouldn't necessarily count that as junk food entertainment, or at least for me. So,
Yeah, and maybe this is a good thing to talk a little bit about, like the brain science too, is that the things that we consume in terms of entertainment also trains our brains in certain ways as well. And so I think this is where like the term brain rot comes from, is because when you're so consumed with this like mindless entertainment, it rots your brain, because then that's all your brain is thinking about, and it trains your brain to only, I guess, like maybe not think as much and be a little less disengaged with the world. And I think that's kind of what the danger is of like being overly indulgent in some of these mindless entertainment things that, like you said, doesn't nourish you, because then you're just so used to like doing nothing and not being engaged in the world. And I think maybe a dissociation happens between you and the rest of the world, where you don't want to engage in a more intellectual way. I think your brain gets so used to not thinking about things more intellectually that it becomes difficult or intolerable to actually engage with something in real life in a more intellectual way. And so I think that's where there's that line of like, when does it become junk food? When does it become brain rot? When it's actually trained our brains to not think further than just that
surface level.
Yeah, that surface level, non-stimulating kind of thing. And I think like short form content is really, I think that's where we see that come up a lot, because the most tangible way that I think people are seeing that is that people's attention spans are reducing, because they've trained their brain to be like constantly stimulated by noise or some sort of I guess like something flashy, like something that's just entertaining but doesn't really have anything substantial in it. And so your brain's constantly getting stimulated but not in an intellectual way. And so like whenever you have to hold your attention span longer than like 3 minutes and there isn't anything new to introduce to it, I think that's when people really struggle with like keeping their attention span in real life, because they're used to like one thing pops up, then another thing pops up. And if you're in this conversation where you're probably like talking about a topic for longer than like 10-15 minutes, your brain just automatically disengages, because that's what you've trained it to do.
Yeah, and I think kind of connecting to something else you said, I think it comes like we talked about media literacy and specifically critical digital media literacy, but like just focusing on the media literacy part, like just thinking about like when we do watch those like longer content pieces, whether it's on social media or it's a TV show or a movie, when done well, like there's these little things that enrich the story. So again, there's like the surface level story that's happening, like very surface level, but then there's also like either side stories or like other levels that add richness, and it might not be like right in your face. And I think thinking back to like some video games I've been playing recently, that again, they're video games, and I think some people would think of like based off this conversation that we're having, like okay, video games is junk food entertainment, but I don't think all video games are junk food. And there's one video game that I actually finished over break called Gris,
Chris, yeah.
Gris, and I definitely would not consider that junk food entertainment, because you're playing as this girl, this, or at least female identifying or female appearing girl person, and you see her, like it starts off. This isn't necessarily a spoiler. It starts off with her like falling to the ground in this like black and white gray like landscape, and there's all these like elemental forces that are kind of like pushing her back and stuff like that. And it can be so easy to just like stop at the surface level and just be like, oh yeah, you're this girl walking across things doing puzzles, and once you finish puzzles, then more colors appear in the world. But the story is about like grief, and I think it's about grief, and I think it's also about community and helping each other even when we are simultaneously in grief. Granted, I haven't checked out the developers to see like what exactly the full story of it, but that is because of media literacy, because of growing up in the 90s, where there were a lot of kids movies and TV shows that, looking back, I'm like, are they actually for kids TV show? But where you see like it has that deeper level. And like even thinking about like some of the like Disney movies that we grew up with, Natalie, like I'm thinking Mulan.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's certain things that I know for sure when I was a child I did not get. And now as an adult, there's like certain lines where it's like, your granddaughter grew up to be a crossdresser. And I'm just like, it's not necessarily changing the storyline, but it adds like a new layer of like understanding that I didn't have as a like child. Like I didn't know what what a quote unquote crossdresser was. Um, and, I mean, in that case, it doesn't really necessarily change the storyline and what's happening, but it just adds like a layer of depth in terms of just the conversation that I just didn't get. And I think sometimes when we do have like the TikToks or the reels, even like the best, like the most, like the reels that are like informative, just because of the nature of that media, you don't always get that layer of depth that you would with longer form media. And again, we're just talking about longer versus short term. There could be other like still longer term, like other video games that people would consider junk food entertainment. But yeah, I media literacy came to mind when you were talking.
Mm-hmm. And I think it makes you think about like how do you synthesize the thing that you are consuming, the entertainment piece of it. Mm-hmm. Because I think I'm somebody who likes to engage with the thing that I'm watching, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
like a movie or a video game or even just social media in general. I like to be able to think about things on a deeper level, think about like how does it apply to me. Part of that is like that's kind of how I've wired my brain. I like to be introspective. I like to think about how I interact with the world and things like that. And so for me, I find it a lot more nourishing for me when I could interact with the media by thinking about like, oh, what kind of symbols come up, what kind of themes come up, which I think which is why a lot of our content on this podcast comes out, because we're both thinking about things on that sub level that you're talking about, and it helps us to be able to synthesize information and think about how does that apply to us, how does it apply to our society, and things like that. And that's a stimulating thing for me. But I could also see that like some people need to turn off their brains too, which is why like, you know, we're not saying that it's bad to have junk food. I think like just like in real life, like you could have a bag of chips, it's not gonna kill you. If that's your whole diet, that might be an issue. But I think there are moments where, you know, there's a lot going on in the world. You're constantly like having to think. I can imagine people who have like perhaps high stress jobs, or they're in a profession where they're constantly thinking all the time and they don't get a break. That's when it becomes necessary for them to have that more junk food entertainment, because it allows their brain to just like quiet down for a moment and not feel the pressure of having to think about something critically, because they've spent so much of their day just critically thinking about something. So I think this also kind of depends on like what do you need for yourself in terms of self-care, because sometimes like you just need to have that bag of chips, or you just might need to have like that ice cream in order to care for yourself. And so I think that's an important thing to consider too, is like how to be in tune with ourselves to know like when do I need to turn off my brain versus when do I need to be more engaged with something, so that I can synthesize information and think more critically, or even think in a way that I haven't been able to think about the rest of the day.
Yeah, which again is like another reason why I really want to get back into like reading books, or at least listening to audiobooks, because sometimes the transition is still hard, but like listening to audiobooks is still count as reading. But yeah, because I read a lot of fan fiction, and I feel like fan fiction is like one of those things that it could be junk food entertainment, but it could also not be, depending on how you like approach it or spin it, or like what type of fan fiction you're reading. Because there's a lot of like really quality fan fiction where I'm just like, wow, this author is giving this to us for free. Like I would pay for this. Like, you know, obviously they would need to like change the names and stuff, you know, of characters, but like we saw it with 50 Shades of Grey, you know, there's like other fan fiction writers that are like way better than that. So like easily could be done. But, you know, I don't know. I think there still was like an element of like, I just wanted like the really quick one shots. And again, there are really, really great, really amazing one shots written on fanfiction.net, AO3. But I don't know. I think I found myself also wanting more books similar to like The Patterns That Remain that I was talking about earlier, where it was less fictional, more just about people's experiences. Because I think also like right now, and maybe also junk food entertainment is like also based off of like what's going on around you. So like maybe one thing that wouldn't necessarily be considered junk food entertainment at one point in your life is later on. But just because of like what's going on in my life, and like the world around me, I just like want to hear more about like people's experiences, so that I don't be so jaded, and I can be more empathetic towards people, especially people who are coming from different like cultures and backgrounds than me. So yeah, I think there, you know, kind of just what we've been saying, there's been a lot of nuances, and you know, as with actual junk food, there's like so many different flavors. Like you can have chips, but there's so many different flavors of chips.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if this conversation is actually about diversifying the things that we think about in our minds. Because I guess the way that I'm thinking about it now is that what we're trying to avoid is being locked into certain patterns of thought all the time. Because I think that's when we damage our ability to work with like entertainment or stimulation in different ways. I'm thinking about like the malleability of our brains, and how sometimes like if we oversimplify things for ourselves, our brain loses that ability to think about things in a more complex way, or even to be able to look outside of a certain perspective. And so I guess this maybe a question of like, how do we allow ourselves to think in diverse ways so that we
Mm,
don't end up being locked into a certain mindset? Because when I think about brain rot too, I also think about like these people who are very locked into a certain way of thinking and seeing the world. And not to say that like, I don't want to demonize the people who are like living and breathing like gamer talk, because there are people out there that's just like navigating life like using memes and things like that, which I think
mm,
is okay, right? I think it's okay to speak in memes or to talk using verbiage from like a video game or from a community that you're in, because I think it helps people understand you better if they are also
mm,
sharing that kind of common language. But also, you have to be able to speak outside of that too, which I think
mm,
is probably where the problem is, when like the only way I could describe my experience is by using a meme and not being able to
mm.
use other words so that other people outside of that can understand.
Yeah, it's like when Americans go to other countries and expect everyone to speak English, or sometimes, as some Americans say, American. So, yeah, we gotta be aware of the world that we're living in.
Right. And I guess that's part of like of being able to challenge ourselves to be outside of ourselves too. I think it's really easy to get focused in on like only watching certain forms of media that like channels our thoughts into
Hmm.
things. And I think that's also what becomes junk food over time as well. Because
Hmm.
then we're not introducing anything new. It's like we're not introducing anything new into our diet. Like all of a sudden I'm a chipitarian and that's all I'm eating. Right? And then like, yeah, there are nutritional benefits to it, but eventually I need other things.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe we're taking this food metaphor too far, but I'm also thinking about like a lot of times when we talk about food, like actual food, we it's like good food versus bad food, and then typically junk food is like the bad food, and the good food is like grilled grilled chicken, or fruits and veggies, which yes, those are good, but I think also, and maybe again, maybe taking this metaphor too far, but like realizing that like there's diversity within good food as well. So you were saying how like gamer talk, like that is not necessarily bad, and you need to like recognize when you should change things up, but like also realize that you can still get the information, you can still engage with other people of other communities, but like still stay true to like who you are as well. So like again, like even just thinking back to like reading a physical book, reading versus reading an audiobook. Like a lot of people are like shaming people who are like, oh, you read it, you listened to an audiobook, that's not actually reading. And there's a variety of reasons why listening or reading via audiobook is just as important, and also sometimes helpful for certain people, depending on like a variety of different things, based off of time, based off of some people are more like audio learners versus visual learners and stuff like that. So just realizing that in this food metaphor that we're using, but also in terms of talking about like how we take in different forms of media, and entertainment, that we're not just saying like there's this one size fits all in terms of what's good media or what's good entertainment, and also what's good food, that there's a diversity, there's a spectrum of it, and again, everything in moderation. But I don't know, that just came to mind. I guess it's also because again we talking about like food, and I've just been thinking about like how actual food has been like colonized,
Mm.
especially in Western culture. So yeah, that's how that came to mind.
Yeah. And even that thought of like bringing up the thought that like it's colonized too, I think that does make you think about like how, like, where do you get your entertainment, what kind of entertainment's out there, and how do you find new entertainment. Because I think our idea of entertainment is also like narrowed depending on how we conceptualize entertainment. Because the way that we're talking about, I realize, is in terms of like digital things. So like media or movies, TV shows, things like that. But I also realize like entertainment encompasses like the outside things, you know, like what the gamers will say, like out there touching grass, right? Like you can go out and play sports, you can go out and like join a board game club or something. Like there's other forms of entertainment that we don't always necessarily think about as entertainment. And perhaps this is because, again, we're in this digital age and we're not thinking about like, how do I entertain myself outside of those spaces? But I think that's a good thing to think about, because I like to talk to people a lot about like active versus passive entertainment. And sometimes like going out and doing stuff, that is like the active entertainment that we need, because it also introduces like movement into our lives. And again, going back to like, what do we need? Sometimes our body needs like just that movement. And so maybe you're going to go out and join like a dance class, or you're going to go out and play a sport or something like that. And that's something to pay attention to as well. I think it's not just about like our brains too. I think some of the entertainment might have to be about how do we engage our bodies. Because also in the age of telehealth, I'm guilty of this as well. I rarely leave the seat just because the nature of my work is that I'm telehealth. So I'm just staring at my screen most of the time. And then when I try to entertain myself, it's like I'm on my phone and I'm scrolling, or I have like a show on in the background and I'm still sitting in this chair. And then what I'm starting to feel in my body is like this sense of restlessness. And I don't always recognize that it's because I actually probably need to get up and do something out there in the real world and engage with it. So that's, I think, an important thing to think about too, of like being sure to do these body scans when we think about like, how do we rest? How do we take care of ourselves in our entertainment? It's not just about our minds, but it's also like, what do our bodies need? Like physically, what do we need?
Yeah, definitely. I was also thinking about like, you know, if you're like me, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to go outside, but I do want to move. Like thinking about things like Dance Revolution, like that's still engagement. You're still moving your body. You're having fun. So like again, it doesn't necessarily have to be like it's one size fits all, or like this like very specific thing. Like there's still a lot of different ways that you can still get that range of movement, that range of entertainment. Yeah.
Not to throw shade at you, Zori, but I was thinking, can you still play Dance Revolution? Like on what media or what gaming platform are you playing Dance Revolution?
Isn't that why it's called Dance Revolution? Like with the, I know it still exists, or maybe it's not Dance Revolution, but is it Just Dance?
Oh yeah, Just Dance. I think you're dating yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. I'm in my 30s. Fine. Okay. It's okay, because you know what, Natalie? Black don't crack.
And Asians don't raisin. So.
Yes. As I was saying, Just Dance. But I'm sure there's probably like a Dance Revolution out there.
Well, you need to wander outside of your house to like an arcade to do Dance Revolution.
Okay. You know, I'll wander out to an arcade. Will I wander out to a park? Maybe not. Will I wander out to a gym? Maybe not. But I will wander out to an arcade, okay, to get my Dance Revolution on.
But that is a good point to bring up, like Just Dance, because even in the digital age, we do have other ways of like entertaining ourselves physically. I'm thinking about like some of the other like Switch games that's very physical and active, where I don't even know if I'm not on the Switch as much. What was that?
Wii's? Are we still a thing, like Wii games?
I don't know. Do people still play the Wii? I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know.
But I think you can still do
that
Switch.
Used to be like a tennis ball, whatever.
Yeah, like Wii tennis and Wii golf and stuff. I think you can still do that. I think you could do that on the Switch.
Yes, the original Wii was discontinued in October 2013. However, Nintendo continues to produce Wii Mini until November 2017.
Oh man. I guess this is revealing a lot about how we don't actually play any of these physical video games.
And also how old we are. Okay.
Yes.
You brought it up, Natalie. You brought it up.
You know, there's a
You
golden
brought
age
this
of,
concept.
there's a golden age of Dance Dance Revolution that I do miss. I do think I was probably more fit because I played Dance Dance Revolution at home, which unfortunately we do not have the luxury of right now.
Yeah, so yeah, I definitely agree with you in terms of like moving your body and uh, I think also we've been talking about things that we do individually, taking things in, moving your body, but I think also communication or being in community with others also is something that maybe makes entertainment different from junk food entertainment. Or I don't I feel like entertainment is like the overarching thing, right? And then we have junk food entertainment, and I don't want to call it like healthy food entertainment because again that feels weird, but just like stimulating entertainment. Yes, let's call it that.
Or
Stimulating entertainment.
engaging.
Engaging. Yeah, engaging entertainment. I feel like there's also like community aspects as well. Um, because yes, should we be always sitting at our desks 24/7? No. But right now, you and I are sitting at our desks, and this is engaging. This is stimulating. I hope. It
Yeah,
is now.
yeah, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
100%.
Uh, and yeah, so I think again it depends on the person, depends on what it is, but yeah, I think there's different aspects of stimulating the movement, the mental, and then also like the interaction community, the interpersonal.
Mm. And I think that what we're getting at is this is a knowing yourself kind of situation to know like what do you consider to be junk food entertainment, just because only you really know what do you need as a person, and I think that helps you to define like when do I have the junk food entertainment? When do I have more engaging entertainment? Because you're going to have different needs at different times. And so this is about knowing yourself, knowing your body, being in tune with your brain and body so that you can give it what it needs. Because, you know, when we talk about rest and self care and things like that, it's being able to provide yourself with the things that you need. And I think we do get that in entertainment, but we do need to be mindful of like, what purpose is this entertainment serving? Is it actually fulfilling the thing that I need at this moment? Because I think it's really easy to reach for junk food entertainment. It's there. It's so easily accessible right now, but it's not always the thing that we need. And so I think that's something
Mm-hmm.
for people to continue thinking about, like how do I get in tune with myself so I know what do I need in some of these moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really emphasizing the mindful part, like being mindful of yourself and your boundaries and like what's happening with you and your body. I also want to highlight no shaming as well, because again, we all have different like views in regards to entertainment, like junk food entertainment versus stimulating entertainment. So like, don't shame others, don't shame yourself. Because again, we're talking about like we are all different people. We all have different things that we're into, and I feel like one thing that you said earlier is like, what is entertainment? And I feel like some of the things that we're entertained with, Natalie, like that we vibe with, I feel like there's other people, especially, we just talked about our age, like we're in our 30s. I feel like there's other people in our 30s who are just like, that is so childish. Like, oh my gosh, grow up. And like I think, to each their own,
Mm-hmm.
and we shouldn't shame people, because I still like watching Disney movies. I mean, there's a moral slash ethical slash political, but if you can get past that, I still like watching Disney movies. I still like watching cartoon movies. Like I probably after this, I will tell my mom that I will use her Amazon account to watch the Sonic 3 movie on And that's a kids movie, but kids movie can still bring joy. It can still be stimulating. There's some kids quote unquote kids movie that I'm just like, yes, these are better than the quote unquote adult movies. Like, can I have more of this, please? So yeah, just don't shame people and don't shame yourself. If it's working out for you, if it is leading to your best life and you're feeling stimulated and you feel like you're being your best self, then go for it.
Yeah, and I think there's also a difference between watching something as a kid versus watching something as an adult. Like, movies look so different as an adult. Even if I've watched it in childhood and I was like, oh, these are all the feel good kind of movies, and then you watch it back as an adult and you're just like, oh man, so many themes in here I just missed as a child because I just wasn't old enough to be able to, again, like synthesize that information, work with it, and things like that. But as an adult, I'm able to. So then it ends up being something that is like engaging to me. So again, that's reminding ourselves to not like judge ourselves or judge other people on their forms of entertainment and things like that. Because I think we all get different things. I think we're all engaged with different things that we're interested in. And so it's hard to say that like, oh, my interest that I'm engaged with is better than what Zori's engaged with in her interests, right? And so I think we can all agree that there's different things that we like to interact with, and not one is better than the other.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Well, I think that's all for our podcast today. Thank you so much, listeners, for joining us today. If you like our content, you like what we've been talking about, make sure that you subscribe to us on Spotify and Apple Podcast. If you're watching us from YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell as well. And then we'll see you next time. So I'm Natalie.
I'm Zori.
And stay on a tangent, folks. Bye.
Bye.